Hello, this is Abigail, and I'm doing a series of vignettes on themes that I've encountered here in Uganda. The first one is just maybe an intro to economic disparity, and it's a big theme, strong theme, and it's probably the first thing that comes to mind when you come to Uganda. So, there's a very strong economic difference between the first world and the third world. I think we all can agree on that. But most of the time, we're overly focused on lacking found in the third world. This overfocus and this lack of understanding between the both worlds erodes sort of the humanity of both sides. As the third world gawks at the overabundance and the overly much money and such of the first world likewise overly focuses on the third world's lacking of this, that, and the next thing, which we freely indulge in every day. But literally everything is kind of dependent upon the person that bridges the two sides. NGOs and business people that run them, or missionaries in short-term missions, and sometimes people like me who've married a Ugandan. He's spent time in my culture, I've spent time in his culture, and we have to handle the perceptions of one side to the other and the other side to the other. And it takes a while, and it takes commitment, and it takes being in the right situation at the right time, and it takes good perception. Sometimes you don't have the right perception at first. It takes a while to formulate those. So since coming to Uganda, there's very little that overpowers the discussion and the awareness of folks other than economic disparity and the perception of economic disparity that the presence of a white person brings. Now, I'm not ratting on the big organizations that do amazing things for the poor that are here. Not ratting on them at all. They really should continue to do what they do. They really should not stop, and they should provide for the poor. Yet I get a little uncomfortable with this long-term relationship and the dignity of the over-focusing on the lacking and the individual needs of those in the third world. The hyper-focus is what I'm zeroing in on. I do acknowledge there are people in Uganda suffering from lack of nourishment. Families skip lunch because breakfast and dinner is all they can budget for. Even I've done that. I've done that here. The kids in my neighborhood generally all have shoes, but usually they are terrible looking shoes and terrible looking clothes. Why? Well, because shoes wear out in the dust and the dirt of Uganda. Kids go without diapers even. But I don't really but I think those kids are cute, and I want to take a photo of them, and they let me take a photo of them. They want me to take a photo of them. But I don't like showing those photos of my kids to my friends back home because, well, then I would have to go into this whole explanation of why my neighbor kids are dressed as they are and why I haven't dressed them better, and can we do something like send suitcases of clothes over and dress these kids? And part of it's like, well, that's not the most important thing. And I have to explain that they're fed and they are well cared for, but their shoes are dirty and broken because comparing to an American kid stays inside where there's carpet, and the shoes don't break on carpet. They break because they're out with stones and trees and this kind of thing. So I have to explain all those things, and most friends don't really have the time or the mental endurance to have their perceptions sort of overturned like that, or, moved into that. I have to explain how one sort of dances close to the edge of hunger sometimes, and we're all still okay. Dancing close to the edge of hunger? Yeah, that's a thing. And it's rather easier to just kind of grab the wad of cash that's shoved at you to supposedly make those dirty clothes and shoes go away. So I can easily see how it's easier as a bridger not to explain and to just simply let people think what they will. That kids in Africa are poor and needy, and after all, that's kind of true in many places. After all, everyone does need education, and if I, the agency, must carry money and means for all my sustenance and existence here, that may be the way to go. There are some charities that actually fund themselves completely through overhead costs. They have their overhead costs, but then they do take photos of kids who they support, and the overhead cost sustains them because they sustain enough kids. So most bridgers, I can see how they're willing or not willing to deal with folks and their expectations back home. And it's maybe a little bit of an internal struggle to decide how much energy to put toward a paradigm shift in another person. But for me, I'm doing this. I'm saying it how I see it, because for me, I tend toward doing the more difficult thing often. And then because of my situation and vantage point, I aim at a more honest long-term relationship on both sides because, well, I'm married to a Ugandan and I'm a thinker. And I would have been a philosopher had my background considered it a useful thing to be. So if describing and understanding the true nature of things as they are in Uganda, if it requires a paradigm shift for people back home, that might be hard for someone. So rather than doing it personally, I've decided to publish some of these videos so that my reach can go out there a little further. And so voicing some of my thoughts so that people can just listen if they like and decide privately if they want to do the paradigm shift with me. So coming to Africa is by its very movement sort of a debate or a discussion in economics. You can't avoid it, especially in this global environment of today. Even when one comes to Africa only to share Jesus and save souls, it becomes about economics, because the glaring difference is that the bags you carry with you on the plane is way more than a good number of families have. But then the other truth is that once the contents of those bags are used up, the person who comes with them is almost as vulnerable as some baby you would maybe throw in the bush. You don't survive beyond those 3 bags, or whatever comes with it. One model I've seen for folks coming in and doing a mission are the Mennonites. My sister is from a community that was actually started by Mennonites who established themselves in that community. Now, these Mennonites look differently than everyone else, and very likely they wouldn't be hired by anybody in the community because they would be considered extremely strange. So what they often do is go into a community, and the ones who are sending them, or who the church and the communities that are sending them, also give them support for several years before they get their businesses established and running and are self-sufficient. So that is one way I've seen that actually works fairly well with missions in new communities where folks are very different. So one paradigm shift that us comers and bridgers really have to deal with and grapple with is that we have to make a choice whether we live in the same economic situation that other Ugandans live in, or whether we choose to bring our economic situation with us and plant it here. Sometimes we sort of scoff at the ridiculous expeditions of old colonizers. The first expedition to the South Pole, or one of them, There were a few men who died in those expeditions because they froze to death, because what they carried with them couldn't sustain them to bring them to the South Pole and back to safety. But within their bags, they carried heavy dinner plates and a full service of forks, spoons, knives, this kind of thing. And it was to their demise. The explorers that first came to Uganda had porters to carry all the stuff that would sustain them from their journey from the coast. I've not yet read the logs and about all the things they carried with them, but there is much commentary on the ridiculous nature and the manner and the disruptive manner that their travels had for nationals that lived here. Now, rather than being extremely judgmental about those folks, we can take a lesson from them and wonder as to whether the things we carry with us disrupt us or from our goals or support us in our goals. There's a debate among expats here. How much should you pay the people you hire? By the way, why are we called expats and not immigrants? But the debate is, should you pay the people you hire a living wage, or should you pay them the going rate, what everyone else, what every other national in the country pays? Even though it's not a living wage, there is a difference, the going rate and the living wage. There's sometimes an impassioned debate that we're not being a good witness if we don't pay them up to the amount that is a living wage for them. But on the other side of that is that we're bringing disruptors. One disruptor is that we are attracting students, or the NGOs are attracting students into social work because they want to work for the big NGOs in the country that provide sustenance to the poor. The social work profession is not really intended to contribute towards solving social disparities in Ugandan society. It's more towards a dead-end career for a distributor of Western charity. Social worker simply goes out and assesses whether or not a family is poor enough to receive this, that, and the next thing from the Western charity. But in this debate, the question nobody has ever asked, except for now, I'm asking it, is what if the expat or the immigrant absolutely cannot pay more than the going rate? Literally, what if one came in and lived in Uganda at the same level as Ugandans around you? What if you were just as broke as everybody else? I've never heard that question. So then the question is how to restructure yourself such that the economic situation or preferences that you bring is not an impediment to the mission you have set out to accomplish. Some of us Bridgers come, and we just accept this particular situation as it is. Because what can you do? Besides, you have many other things to worry about. Clothe those kids, do this, that, and the other thing. Take your overhead. Wouldn't it be an easier thing to do? Yet, in the middle of that, are you really accomplishing your mission? For me, these are the questions I ask. And economic disparity is very, very visible to me here in Uganda. And it certainly is visible to others. What is the best way to go about it? This is the question. So, if these videos rattle you, or if they inspire you, and you want to say something back to me in the comments or on my blog, feel free to. Just remember, I ascribe to and promote principles of netiquette. I'm an instructional designer by trade, so netiquette is the golden rule, and the principle of Jesus is the other. Thank you.